You are now joining Reaper Radio. Welcome to the dark void of the human brain, where oddities, freaks, horror, and gore lurk around every corner. Expect the unexpected as we tap into the minds of haunted house owners, gamers, musicians, and much more. Grab a blanket, lock the door, and prepare for the horror. We are Reaper Radio.
Good evening and welcome to the very first episode of Reaper Radio. I am your host, Matt Storm.
And I'm Damien Reaper.
And we are joined in studio today with the owner of M.A.U.L, Traveling Actor and Production Services, the co-host of the Big Scary Show podcast, and the unknown scare actor himself, Jim Millspaugh. Jim, how you doing?
I'm doing great. You guys make me sound like I'm better than I am, but thank you.
So, Jim, tell us, where did your passion for horror and Halloween begin?
You know, this goes way back. Anybody who knows me knows that I'm on the other side of 50. I'll just get that out of the way. And I'm going to go way back to when I was 4 years old. At the age of 4, I found I had this need to scare my mother at every opportunity. I would hide behind bookcases, doors, anything I could to scare my mother. And it just kind of came on from there. The whole Halloween thing, I loved to dress up as a kid. I made a Spider-Man costume when I was 8, and it blossomed from there, but I've always had that need to scare people. I don't know why. Some people look at me and go, "You're nuts," but you know what? It's part of my life, and the more people I can scare, the better.
Absolutely. It goes from a hobby to a lifestyle in that sense. How did all of it get started? You know, how did you get started in the haunted attraction industry?
Well, you know, I have to go backwards to go forwards. And way back as a kid, I did little home haunts around my house. I had things like I would rig ghosts that would fly down from fishing line.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And I would dress myself up and make it look like I was a dummy with a bowl full of candy, and people would reach into it and I would grab them. And it was that need to scare people. And it just kind of blossomed from there. And if I fast forward myself, I grew up in Florida, for people that don't know that. And, you know, in Florida, you had Universal Studios, Disney, that type of thing. And I went to one of the very first Halloween Horror Nights at Universal Studios, which actually wasn't called Halloween Horror Nights.
Okay.
It was called Universal Studios Fright Nights. And that just kind of lit the fire. I was doing Rocky Horror already, so it was kind of a natural progression. So I spent time every Halloween coming up with new costumes and things, haunting my house wherever it may be. And you fast forward to 2007 when I moved up to Ohio from Florida. I didn't do anything in 2007, but in 2008, everybody that's in the Cincinnati area knows about Kings Island, and they do their Halloween attraction thing, which has progressed over the years. It used to be, I think it was a Fright Fest or something like that, Fear Fest. And then it became Halloween Haunt, and now it's just called Haunt. Well, in 2008, I helped them open a brand new attraction at the time called Urgent Scare.
Okay.
And it was a big undertaking for them. They had like 70 people, 3,500 square feet, and in the outside queue line, you had 20 to 30 zombies or infected people.
Sure.
Well, they put me in the attraction initially as a victim. And I was in the first hospital room you come into as a victim, and it was effective. It made people gross out, but it wasn't what we were looking for. So the supervisors that ran the haunt came up to me and said, "We have something else in mind for you." And I turned from being a victim to being an aggressor. I turned from a person in a bed to the chief of staff of the hospital in a pseudo elevator, you know, as an elevator simulation, and just scaring for lack of a better term, scaring the hell out of people. It was just me and a nurse and a retractable knife, and I worked with the makeup staff to really come up with a character that was freaky, and this character was blind, and I had this retractable knife, like I said, with a nurse. I can see perfectly. People don't realize that. I'm swinging this knife all over the place. The only person that gets stabbed is the nurse. I had people trying to get out of the elevator simulation when I came towards them. We were freaked out so much. So that was my real introduction into the professional part of the haunted attraction industry. And I thank Kings Island for that opportunity. It really brought me in there and gave me the chance to start flexing my creative muscle.
Sure.
Where did the unknown scare actor come from?
That's a very good question, Mr. Reaper, and I'll tell you. I'm going to date myself again. As I told you, I'm on the north side of 50, and I'm going to go all the way back to the Gong Show in the 70s. Anybody remember the Gong Show?
I do remember watching video of it.
Okay, there was a comedian called the Unknown Comedian, and he wore a bag over his head. Okay. When the unknown scare actor first came to be, nobody knew who he was. I was always wearing a mask, a hood, something to hide my identity. I've got several YouTube videos out there, always in mask and costume. And it just kind of evolved from there. And then it became a game to see who could figure out who the unknown scare actor was, you know? And my original intent was never to let anybody know who I was. Right. And the very first Midwest Haunters Convention, I walked the entire floor. I was in street clothes, but I always had some kind of mask on my face. And it was funny when people would talk about the unknown scare actor, and I'm just smiling going, you're talking about me.
Yeah.
You know? And a friend of ours, you guys probably know her, Julie Langendorfer.
Yep.
When we were working at the Dent Schoolhouse, she came up to me after, I think it was in my third year, and she goes, wait a second. She goes, you're the unknown scare actor? And I said, everybody else here has known this for 2 years. Where have you been? And it's just, the unknown scare actor has become more of a brand. Mm-hmm. A lot of people know who I am now, and it's a joke now because I'm the worst kept secret in the haunt industry, because all you have to do is look up Jim Millspaugh and you'll find the unknown scare actor.
Right.
And like I said, it's a brand. I enjoy it. It's a business. Unknown Scare Actor LLC is my parent business. So I'm going to keep doing the Unknown Scare Actor as long as I can. Whether or not people know who I am, it doesn't matter to me. He's a fun character, and I'm glad I made him.
And I would imagine you have millions of stories to tell about some of your haunted experiences, but if you had to take one as your most memorable, what would it be?
Oh, well, I have to go back to the Dent Schoolhouse. And this was back when they had detention hall out back. Mm-hmm. This was even before my business partner, Jason. This was just me and Kirby Hilliard and Pat Hennessy and Matt Adams. And there was a family that we had trapped in the center. For people that don't know what detention hall was, it was a 3,500 square foot maze that we knew intimately, and we knew how to move around it, and it just made for awesome scares. We trapped this family in the center of the maze. And it was a mother, it was 2 teenage boys and 2 teenage girls, their dates. And this was the first year detention hall was there, so there was not even a covering over the top of the maze. It was just open air. And we had them surrounded, and here comes Pat with the chainsaw. Now, for those of you that are listening that don't understand the chainsaw, guys, there's no blade. It's just a bar. It's the sound that scares you. Well, Pat had this thing where he'd get down low and he'd tap people on the ankles with the chainsaw. And like I said, we have these people surrounded. He went down to go tap ankles, and there were 2 sets of feet missing from what was originally there. The fences are 8 feet tall, and somehow, some way, I don't know how, but the boys in this group had scaled the fence and were outside the attraction in 2 seconds flat, leaving Mom and the girlfriends to our mercies inside the middle of the maze. And, you know, it tickled us because we're like, where'd they go? Moving a little bit ahead, we finally let the girls go, but we didn't let Mom go. Okay. But Mom said something that just, we all had to take pause. And, you know, we don't like to break character. That's a big no-no, but we came close. And we had her trapped there. She looks at Pat. She looks at Kirby. She looks at me. And she goes, oh, a threesome. What do you say to that? You know, it's like you don't expect it. We had to take a step back and then go back into monster mode. But for a split second, we're like, okay, what do we say? This was completely unexpected. But it was just so much fun, and that's one of the memorable times. I can tell you another story, and we're going to move forward 2 years, I think it was. And this is when Jason Henry, my late business partner, was really in with us down there. It was still detention hall, but it had a military, no, it was a clown, no, it was military theme, still military theme. And there was an iPhone app where you could take a picture of a friend. Yeah. And I would step behind scenes. I would pull up this picture on my iPhone, and that was our target. And we were okay to grab this person, which is a big no-no in the haunted attraction industry. Yep. You don't just grab people randomly, but they had something going where we were allowed to do this. And there was a 16-year-old boy that was called out. So myself, Jason, and a couple of other characters came out to go capture this boy and drag him into the haunt. Now, a 16-year-old boy, you expect to be a little bit tough, you know, but this boy was the exact opposite of that. Jason came around one side, I came around the other. He split. He left the queue line, running, and we're keeping up, and then we're keeping him boxed in. We finally caught him over towards the back of the main haunt. Jason threw him over his shoulder and carried him into the middle of the maze and sat him down. I thought we were done at that point. I didn't think it, you know, it was fun, but I thought the bit was done. And I worked the front of the maze and the queue line. So I'm standing up there working the queue line, and Jason sticks his head out from the curtain and he goes, "Psst, hey, come here." And I said, "What's wrong?" And he goes, "That kid, he peed all over me." I said, "He was 16. He said, "I know, but we really scared him." And Jason was covered. His entire right side was covered in urine.
Oh, man.
But true to form, Jason never wanted to go get cleaned up. He finished the night in that urine-soaked costume, and we had a great story to tell at the end of the day.
That's passion at its finest there.
It was just, Jason was on a different level, but we'll get to him.
Were there any films that helped spark your passion in the haunt industry?
You know, I'm going to tell you guys a little story about me growing up, and I told you about my love for Halloween, but I was also a big scaredy cat growing up. I couldn't watch a horror movie as a kid. It would scare me too bad. Bad to the point, and you know, all the way up to the age of 10, if it scared me so bad, I'd beg my parents if I could sleep in their bedroom. I was so scared. And at the age of 18, I don't know, some switch flipped in my head and said, "Hey, you're an adult now, get over it." So, you know, there's a lot of influences out there. I like to look at some of the classics, the Universal Monsters. I did a Frankenstein character once as a preteen. And then there's some of the more current, and when I say current, I'm going to go back to the 90s now, 80s and 90s. You know, everybody was influenced by Nightmare on Elm Street and Scream and, you know, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I have a little story about that I'll tell you guys too. But, and that was a 70s movie. But Alien was a big influence, not because of me being able to dress up like an alien. It was just that whole suspense, terror, creature coming after you. It's the whole ball of wax, just in a different venue. Yeah. Instead of being a xenomorph, you're some kind of large hulking person that's going to scare people. So there's a lot of influences in my life. So if I had to nail down one particular movie that was influential, I couldn't. But I would say Universal is the biggest influence.
We hear you're a big Rocky Horror guy. What are your roots in that production?
Wow. Rocky Horror, big part of my life. Now, Rocky Horror was released in 1977, okay, at which I was the age of 12. Do the math. I refused to go see Rocky Horror all the way up until my 18th year because I associate it with a horror film because of the title, so I would not go see it. Right. So finally, somewhere in my senior year, somebody dragged me in to see Rocky Horror, and I was hooked. Initially, I wanted to be Rocky Horror, you know, but he's blonde and muscle-bound and slender, and I'm bald and heavy and not Rocky material. So in 1986, a roommate of mine said, "Hey, let's do a Rocky Horror live cast." Okay. So we put everything together. We got a hold of the movie theater, and for the next 11 years, Rocky Horror was a part of my life. I've played at any given time every single character that's in the cast, which is really frightening if you consider me as Columbia. or magenta. But my primary character was Eddie, who was played by M.A.U.L. I also did, for the first 4 or 5 years, I did Eddie and Dr. Scott. So as soon as Eddie got killed, I had to run down, go change my complete costume, get rid of the makeup, and get into the wheelchair for Dr. Scott. And I would usually just make it just in time for Dr. Scott's entrance.
Sure.
Finally, you know, as time progressed and things moved around, I was always active, usually playing Eddie, not so much Dr. Scott anymore. And let me tell you something, when you're playing Frank, a pair of size 13 stilettos, really uncomfortable. But I can do it. I've walked in heels and worn fishnets, which really disturbed my my aunt, who was a born-again Christian. And she thought that Rocky Horror was satanic. So I was living with my mom at the time, and I said, well, I'll show you how satanic it is. Walked in, put on my Dr. Scott costume, walked out, and I said, there's nothing satanic about this movie. I said, if you've got a homophobic problem, that's different. But I stood there in high heels and my garter belt and my stockings and my suit jacket with tie and my glasses, and got her. Yes, I had underwear on too, thank you. But I absolutely love Rocky Horror. It's, you know, it's part of it's a part of me. It's part of how I became a haunter professionally. So Rocky Horror, you guys that still do it. I saw some people today at Horror Hound that still do Rocky Horror. Keep doing it. It's great. I mean, it's an old movie by today's standards, but it'll still keep going as long as people enjoy it.
Sure.
Tell us about the Big Scary Show podcast.
It actually has its roots in another podcast called Rotting Flesh Radio. Rotting Flesh Radio was the podcast for the industry at the time. I had discovered it probably back in 2000, probably about in 2008 is when I discovered it. Started listening, started corresponding, and then come 2010, I messaged the guy that ran it, Jonathan Johnson, and he was looking for what he calls his casket crew, which is, you know, correspondence. He took me on where the Unknown Scare Actor, I was the Unknown Scare Actor at this point, and the Unknown Scare Actor did a segment about fears, phobias, things like that.
Yeah.
And this went on for a few months, and Rotting Flesh Radio was getting more and more sporadic. The owner had different ventures and things that he was moving on with. So there was no consistency. And there was a void that was being left because he wasn't releasing shows consistently like people were used to. Because for 5 or 6 years, he was releasing a show every 2 weeks for the industry, and everybody listened. It was one of those things that if you wanted the latest news, you listened to Rotting Flesh Radio. Well, with his inconsistencies, people weren't getting that news, and there, like I said, there was a void there that needed to be filled. And he finally decided he was going to get out of it completely. Well, there were 3 other guys that were a part of Rotting Flesh Radio that didn't want to see this end and wanted to keep something going. So Drew Badger, who was basically one of the voices from Rotting Flesh Radio, he contacted me because we had already met at this point in time, and said, hey, let's, we got to keep something going. I've been talking to Jerry Vane and Jason Storm. Let's do our own podcast. So we started talking and we started working on it, and we started talking in January 2012.
Okay.
We weren't ready we had to compile things. We weren't ready to do something. We communicated. We were keeping ourselves going, trying to debut a show. And it came down to it. We decided who was going to do what. Somehow I ended up being the producer. It's just because of my MacBook. No, I'm kidding. But I volunteered to do production on it. Honestly, we use Audacity. If anybody knows about Audacity, it's an open source mixing software. And we use Audacity to this day. Well, we had our debut on April 13th, 2012, which was a Friday. The funny thing about that is also the same day I got laid off from my previous job.
Oh, man.
We were debuting that day, and I got laid off like 4 hours before we debuted. But it didn't matter. We wanted to get the show out there. And as a side note, I got another job 3 weeks later, so we're okay. But Big Scary Show has been evolving ever since then. And honestly, back in 2012, if I thought I would still be doing it now in 2017, I didn't see it. We had our growing pains. Initially there were people complaining about mix levels and, volumes all over the place, and that was just something that came with time. The nice thing about the Big Scary Show is all four of us have our own specialty in the business. Drew Badger, he is the voice of the show. He does the news. He's very in your face out there. He connects with everybody. You've got Jerry Vane. I started out as a fan of Jerry's. Jerry's one of my best friends now. And Drew is too, and Jason, all the guys. But Jerry, I messaged him saying, dude, I just bought the first album that I found of yours. I love it. And here I am. I can call him anytime I want. I can have him do custom music for me. I still have to pay him for it, but he puts a little extra into it. And he moved to Columbus from Las Vegas. Not for me, obviously, but he's here where the haunters are. And and then you move on to Jason Storm. Jason, he's what we call our marketing weasel. He's the numbers guy. He looks at things and tells us, what we're going to charge this year. And in me, I produce the show. So we've all got our fortes that we do in the show. And what blends us together and makes us a cohesive unit 5 years later. Numbers are still growing. People are still listening. And I love the show so much, I've got a tattoo on my arm that says Big Scary Show. www.bigscaryshow.com. You can also find us on iTunes. Just look up Big Scary Show Podcast. And you can also find us on Facebook. Just search Big Scary Show on Facebook. And you can find out everything big and scary about us. We're coming out with new things. We're going to start doing a live. We got little selfie mics now that we put our phones on it. We can do live interviews.
All right.
Right there on the show floor. We paid like $14 a piece for the selfie mics. And I know Storm's tried it at a convention. Jerry hasn't yet, but we all four got them. So keep an eye out because we're going to have some Big Scary Show live feeds at Transworld next weekend.
Awesome. Ooh. Awesome. I look forward to seeing them. So you are the co-owner of M.A.U.L Traveling Actor and Production Services. Can you tell us a little bit about M.A.U.L?
Well, I'm the owner now. I used to be the co-owner. And I'll explain. M.A.U.L started out actually at Dent. And, for those of you at Dent, Bud, Chuck, Josh, you guys gave me opportunities that really helped me grow. But I grew, and we grew beyond Dent. And Jason Henry came up to me towards the end of season in 2013 and said, Jim, we need to move on. We need to do something. He goes, I want to put something together, and I want you to run it. Because he respected my experience in the business, and I basically trained Jason. When he came to us, he was just as green could be. Mm-hmm. And he was bombarding me constantly with questions about haunting. And I was in my element as I was feeding him information, giving him advice. I was loving it. So he said, let's put this team together. So we fast forward a little bit to Transworld of the following year. And I approached Bud and I said, Bud, thank you for the opportunities. I said, but I'm going to move on, and I've got people that are moving on with me. So that's really where M.A.U.L began. And we just started searching out people that were looking to be creative again. And what better way to be creative than to have a team of actors that you can offer different types of characters for haunts that may need our services. And I have found that almost every haunt out there needs actors at one point in time or another, whether or not they want to admit it. There's a market, there's a need for what M.A.U.L is. M.A.U.L stands for Mobile Actors United Legion. And it was Jason's dream to take this as far as we could. But honestly, we both looked at each other and said, let's just do something. Let's have fun. We weren't out to try to make money. We just wanted to be able to go out to a haunt, scare people, and do it our way. So that's what we had planned to do. And then fate intervened. Mm-hmm. There's another traveling actor out there by the name of Scott Tater Lind. Mm-hmm. And anybody who knows Tater knows Granny and knows Duane. He is constantly booked early. He usually gets booked by Transworld, which is in March. And Tater's just one of those people that is entertaining, plain and simple. People want him. People will pay for him. He goes to California, he goes to Texas, he goes all over. M.A.U.L hasn't gotten to that point yet, but there was a haunt that contacted Tater wanting to have him come out for an entire season. And he says, well, I'm booked solid. He says, I know somebody you need to talk to. And that's where we come in, because the owner of this attraction, and I'll tell you the attraction is called Indy Scream Park. Mm-hmm. It's in Anderson, Indiana. And the owner contacted me and said, hey, let's work something out. I need queue line actors. Well, it turns out, just like the name, they're a scream park. And they have this midway area and 5 haunts. And people were getting disgruntled because there's no entertainment going on while they're in the queue line. And what better way to bring us in than to help them take care of this problem? So we hammered out all the details back and forth, and we finally made our appearance. And it wasn't without, hiccups, brand new business getting started, and ups and downs, but we worked through it, and we succeeded our first year, and they were happy. And that was this is the 4th year they've already contacted me a month ago about booking for this year already. And they did that last year. So we must be doing something right, because here we are, they're booking us for the 4th year in a row, but we don't want to just be relegated to one attraction. So M.A.U.L has been growing this whole time. Over the past 4 years, it has slowly, organically grown. We have traveled to so many different haunts, whether it's 2 of us or 10 of us. We have worked at haunts like Scaratorium, Fear Fair. We have worked at Backwoods Oddities. We have worked at the Waverly Hills Sanatorium. We have worked at 100 Acres Manor. And we're not done yet. We're still looking for haunts. There's a new haunt that I can't tell you about yet.
Dun, 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 dun.
But there's a new haunt coming into Ohio. All I can tell you is it's somewhere between Cincinnati and Columbus. And we are already booked for the entire season with them. It is March. I am looking for more people in order to be able to cover all these other haunts. M.A.U.L is a dream, and it's a haunt without a haunt, if that makes sense. Because we've got the opportunities to go to these different attractions, and you're not always at the same attraction. That's one of the things I love about this team. I can send people here or I can send people there, and it's not the same thing over and over again. And no disrespect to Dent, but there were times when it kind of got a little stale because it was the same thing over and over and over.
Right.
And I loved scaring people. But this gives me the opportunity to scare differently at different attractions. And I'm even kind of taking a step back, and I'm letting some of the younger team really move forward. I'm the mentor. Everybody calls me Dad. So I may not act as much now, but the bug's going to, the fever's there. The bug's going to bite me. I'll be out there scaring at least a couple of times every year. But I'll tell you one thing about M.A.U.L. If there's one person I could say there's a cheerleader for this team, it has to be Damien. I mean, Damien has kind of taken over the heart that Jason had for this team. Jason, rest his soul, great friend, great brother, lost him way too young, and it affected us all differently. And I know it affected Damien very deeply because of their connection. And I think Damien's done a very good job of being the heart of the team, whereas I'm the soul of the team. Damien, you're the glue, really. I mean, if you think about it, you may not think so, but the heart of the team is the glue that holds us all together. And whether or not you want to believe it, Damien, you're the heart.
I really appreciate it.
And I'm sure Jason would be proud of you. I know he's proud of all of us.
Oh, yeah.
And he lets us know every once in a while. And we just so you guys know that the Lady of Darkness, who's sitting here in the studio with us, being very quiet, she and Jason didn't get along. It was well documented. But after Jason's passing, she's come to an agreement with Jason because she has communicated with him. And Jason likes to mess with her now. But not in a bad way. If you believe that type of thing, we do, there's always something on the other side. So M.A.U.L is just a conglomeration of talent and desire and fun. And those are the 3 words that I think would describe this team best.
Okay, so can you tell us, what is the process like of finding new attractions to travel to?
There are tons of haunts out there.
Sure.
And as M.A.U.L grows, the need to find other haunts grows as well. And we've been fortunate so far because I've had haunt owners come up to me and say, hey, we're looking to book you. We need your services. But we're expanding. We've been expanding. We've got team members now in different parts of the country. I've got a few team members in St. Louis, Missouri. I've got team members in New Orleans, Louisiana. I've got a team member in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've got people in Columbus, Ohio. So how do we get these haunts? Well, this is the year where we're going to test that because it's always been word of mouth, reputation. And we've had some big names that have requested our services. Fear Fair, for example. Brett Hayes at Fear Fairies. I ran into him at a Halloween, what was it, the Scare Factors party.
Yeah.
Team Zombillies.
Yep.
And he came up to me and says, we need to talk because I want to book your people. He said he wanted to talk in July. Well, Brett, if you're listening to this, we need to talk soon because I'm almost booked.
You better be listening.
That's right. So I'm planning on, I've got a couple of people that are really good on the phone. I will be the first one to admit I am not. And I'm going to get a list of haunts through the Scare Factor. And I'm going to throw the shout out to Nora and Tyler here because they keep a very comprehensive list.
Really good people.
Absolutely.
And we're going to use their list, and we're going to start making calls in New Orleans, in St. Louis, in Charlotte, trying to get haunts that may be interested in our services. You know, it may take a lot of phone calls, but if we get 1 or 2 haunts in every location, that's a win-win for us. So it's a work in progress is the simplest way I can answer that question.
Right. And for the next topic, no matter where you are in the country, no matter what haunted house you're at, there is always going to be kids in the line. Now, some people see the kids in the line as, oh, we have kids in the line coming to come in the haunted house. I see them as the next generation of haunted house actors because once we're all out, it's the people that are kids now that are going to come in to take over. Now, if you had any advice you could give the next generation of haunted house actor, what would that be?
That is a very tough question, Matt. There's so much knowledge that I would like to impart on some of these, but I think you can tell the kid that's going to be the haunt actor just by the way he reacts in the queue line. If you see the kid that just looks at you and rolls his eyes, he's got potential. And people are thinking, no, but think about it. He's a little bit jaded, and he's probably got that desire to scare somebody of his own.
Absolutely.
Now, that isn't to say that you don't see some kids that are just terrified because to this day, I know people that will work in a haunted attraction but will never go through one. Mm-hmm. So my best advice to the next generation would be to pay attention to the current generation. Watch and learn. That is the best advice I can give you. If you're young, if you're in your teens and you're ready to scare people, go to a haunted attraction. Go to a good haunted attraction. I'm not saying, I shouldn't say good because it varies from location to location, and everybody's tastes are different. But check out your local haunted attractions. Watch your queue line actors. Watch the people in the haunt. Try not to mess up their scares and appreciate it. Because too many people, the people that aren't going to make it in this business, will try to step on a scare. They'll walk into a haunt in a room, and I heard it numerous times. There's somebody there, there's somebody there, there's somebody there. You've just ruined it for everybody. It's the kid that goes through that doesn't tell you where everybody is that's going to make the good haunt actor.
Exactly.
So you guys, I mean, Matt, especially you could be considered the next generation of haunt actor just because of your age at this point. But you've been doing this for a number of years, so we're going to put you in the old guard, and I'm sure your dad will appreciate that too. But people like Damien, who's at the age of, what are you now?
I'll be 34 on Thursday.
34, and he's honestly done this longer than I have.
I've done it since Jesus Christ was around.
So, yeah, for you next generation of haunters, you guys don't know how easy you've got it because we've paved the way. Just pay a little bit of attention, and you could be really something special.
Absolutely.
Tell us about your pre-haunt music playlist. What gets you ready to go in there?
I was reading this question before we got into the studio, and I've got so many different songs that come to mind. When I first started working at Kings Island, that's when I really first found out about Midnight Syndicate. Mm-hmm. And I started scrambling, trying to get every piece of music I could from them because it was just gothic horror soundtracks. It was just right up my alley. And one of the first albums that really motivated me when I was working at Kings Island was called The Rage. And it was a soundtrack from a movie. Mm-hmm. And I emailed Midnight Syndicate because they asked a similar question. And I sent them a story about me and what I do and everything. And I won the contest for that month and ended up getting one of their albums free. Now Ed and Gavin are good friends. I brewed beer for Midnight Syndicate before. I made a Midnight Syndicate ale a couple of years ago. So if I have to say, if there's any one thing that drives me, it's Midnight Syndicate's music. And it depends on what the venue is and which of the 10 plus characters I have I'm using will decide what soundtrack I listen to, whether it be Born of the Night, Realm of Shadows. The Rage is still a big one. When I really want to get pumped up and get a lot of energy, the Rage is still there. I go off a little bit sometimes, and I'll listen to some Rob Zombie.
Okay.
So those are my inspirations for the music that really just gets me going. And to answer your question definitively, it has to be Midnight Syndicate's Rage soundtrack.
Okay. And we're going to go ahead and finish off the show with our final topic, and this is a topic I could talk about for hours. I am a big gamer. I am a next-gen PS4 gamer now. Used to be an Xbox guy, but PS4 took me. What kind of video games do you enjoy playing, Jim? Are you a gamer yourself?
I'm a casual gamer. I will say in the house right now, I've got a PlayStation 3 and Xbox One.
Okay.
I've got an Xbox 360. I've also got an emulator on the PC with old arcade games.
Okay.
So I enjoy a wide variety of games. My game of choice right now is Rory McIlroy's PGA Tour Golf.
Okay.
Now, with that being said, I have played Silent Hill, Resident Evil,
Sure.
Dead Rising, Batman, the whole Arkham series.
Great series.
Yeah, it is. It's dark and things like that, which I really appreciate. And Batman's always been a big influence too.
Absolutely.
A big Batman fan.
I am the knight.
But right now, it is PGA Tour Golf.
Here's a topic that'll make a lot of people argue. Who is your favorite Batman?
Good question. Now, if you go back to, people would immediately assume that I would say Adam West.
Okay.
Because as a child, I watched Batman with Adam West and Burt Ward. I had a little dog named Rusty.
Right.
And I used to run around with a Batman shirt on. I was Batman, Rusty was Robin. This is when I was 4 or 5 years old. Okay? People are going to really be blown out of the water by this. And it's not Michael Keaton, and it's not even Christian Bale. I liked Ben Affleck as Batman in Batman versus Superman.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit odd. And, you know, back in the time, I used to have the Batman suit from the 1989 movie with Michael Keaton and Jack Nicholson. So don't get me wrong. Keaton really surprised me as Bruce Wayne. But while Christian Bale has a certain intensity, I think that Ben Affleck actually portrays Bruce Wayne better than any of the others I've seen if you go by the comic book and the darkness that is Bruce Wayne / Batman. So, yeah, there's my answer. It has got to be Ben Affleck.
Okay, and I'm not sure if you heard, I mean, we're all a bunch of horror fanatics here. They're actually making a Friday the 13th, the video game, that's going to be coming out for next-gen consoles. And it's going to be basically an online game where you get a certain set of players playing as the campers, and the other person plays as the Jason. So basically the idea is you can use a bunch of the different like kills from the movies. You can use the tactics from the movies, come in, you know, snapping the bunk bed in half, things like that.
I've heard a little bit about that, but this is the most in-depth I've heard, and that's really got my curiosity piqued. Because honestly, I'm not a person that likes to get online and game.
Right.
I just usually do it on my console. But for something like that where I can just kill people without repercussions or jail time,
Right.
that might be fun.
Exactly, yeah.
And it's I used to do it in Grand Theft Auto 4 all the time. You know, just, you kill people, not worry about the cops coming to take you away. So this sounds really intriguing, and I'm definitely gonna have to check it out.
Right, definitely. Well, thanks, Jim, for coming in. You've heard it first here on Reaper Radio. Again, we're joined in studio by the legendary Jim Millspaugh.
And I wouldn't go that far, but I'll take it.
Yeah, thank you for coming, and you've been a very wonderful boss and, you know, friend all these years. And
I will say you're just saying that because we're in the studio, but no, I know you mean it, Damien. And thank you. You've been a great asset to the team, and even though if you still look like Meatloaf sometimes, that's what first time I met Damien, I said he looked like Meatloaf.
Yeah, I can see it.
And I didn't even know what his real name was for 2 years. But you guys, this has been fun. It's kind of neat to do an interview for a podcast in an actual studio.
Yeah.
As opposed to me walking around with my Zoom H2 and being on the show floor. So this is kind of neat. and I'm kind of digging it. So,
Jim, before we go, can you give out M.A.U.L's website? Can you tell us where upcoming actors could contact you?
Absolutely. You can reach us at maulmonsters.com. That's M-A-U-L monsters.com. There's a contact page on there where you can reach out to us because we are definitely looking for new actors as we're growing. We need more actors to fill all these spots. You do have to be 18 and over for legality purposes, but if you are over the age of 18, I'm willing to talk to you. We need actors, and for those of you that may be listening that are looking for actors to fill in your haunt, again, maulmonsters.com with the contact list, or you can reach out to us on Facebook at M.A.U.L Traveling Actor and Production Services. Send us a Facebook message, and we will get back to you ASAP.
Join us.
Thanks for having me, guys. It's been a lot of fun.
Great. Thanks for coming out.
Oh, yeah.
You've been listening to Reaper Radio. Reaper Radio was brought to you by Storm Nation Network and the Damned One Productions. If you want to be a guest on the show or have a question or comment about the topics we have discussed, we want to hear from you. Email reaperradiopodcast@gmail.com or hit us up on Facebook at facebook.com/Reaper Radio.